He's a one-man deforesting machine. You know, we want to get Greenpeace onto. Well, you ask silly questions, you get silly answers. Walking into a cave, things are going to live in there, aren't they? Hi, my name's John Hudson. I'm the UK military's chief survival instructor, and I'm going to check out some footage from the forest. Priority-wise, you want to be signalling for rescue at this point. He's got plenty of stuff around him, just in the fuselage of what's left of the fuselage, to provide warmth. We know from things like the guys who crashed in the Andes in the 70s, they were able to survive just in that kind of bit of an aeroplane with what's around them. So kind of doing the right thing. Whether or not you need to go smashing open all the luggage at this point with an axe, not sure. That axe is interesting. That axe is the same design of axe that is fitted on all the Royal Air Force aeroplanes since the Second World War. And when aeroplanes crashed, which they often did in the war, one of the few things that would survive the crash was the axe, because it's just a really solid lump of kit. But yeah, eventually, if you're on your own, you're going to start rummaging around, aren't you, looking for what's available. And commonly, people will do the kinds of activities you've seen here. So they'll start looking for things to eat really early on. You don't need food early. You're going to need it later, but much more of a priority now is making sure you protect your body's core temperature. So clothing, you know, he's got a short sleeve shirt on. We don't know what temperature it'll be at night. Airplanes can move vast distances. So you might get on somewhere in t-shirt weather, and where it comes down, it could be completely different. You might find things that are difficult to improvise in cases. And as we say, you know, there are going to be meds in some people's packs, so you might find prescription or non-prescription drugs. Stuff like aspirin, you can get that in the wild. Aspirin's from a chemical called salicylic acid. One of the priorities that you'll need to address in survival is water. So you're going to need to drink far sooner than you need to eat. One of the plant indicators of water is the willow species, Salix. And the species name, Salix, is where we get the name for salicylic acid from, because the bark of willow trees contains the same compounds that people make aspirin from, or chemists make aspirin from. So if you find water, which you're definitely going to need, you can get the willow bark, you can chew it, and you'll get the same kind of effect that you would from an aspirin. The landscape looks great, doesn't it? You've got nice trees, what looks like clear water. You can't definitely say it's clean, but it's clear. It gives you a great view of the bountiful harvest of fish that are just swimming around near the edge. Loads and loads of resources. It's a really good place to try and survive in, I think. Can't tell what the temperature's really like just from looking at it, but if he's able to wander around in a t-shirt and isn't averse to diving in, it's probably about the right temperature for us humans. We like climates that are in the sort of mid to high 20s. That's what we're tuned for from our evolution in Africa. That's the kind of place we go to on holiday through choice. So it looks like it's in that Goldilocks comfy zone of not too hot, not too cold to me. Right, excellent. This doesn't get much time on survival TV, but signalling for rescue is a super high priority. In military survival, there's a system that we teach to get the best out of any situation. We just call it PLAN: protection, location, acquisition, and then navigation. Without going into all the detail, protection just means staying alive by keeping warm, not getting like wet and cold, all those kind of good things. Location stands for get rescued. So location, getting rescued, appears far higher than eating and drinking, because you could stay somewhere comfortably eating and drinking, but if you haven't signaled for rescue, you're never going to get home. So that's why it comes so high up, which is great to see in this context, that our characters put in an SOS out early on. If you don't do it quickly, you'll run out of energy, and then it becomes difficult. And it is quite labour intensive putting those big ground to air markers out like he's done there. And SOS is a good option because everyone knows what it means. The bigger you can do it, the better. There are people who've done less and got away with it. There's a guy who got lost called Jeff Keys in Australia. He was walking through the Australian bush just in his underpants, like literally a pair of budgie smugglers. He got lost in a river, but he managed to get rescued because he wrote SOS in a sandbank before he keeled over under a bush. So if you can do that bit right, you'll survive. The first thing I'd say about the shelter that he's chosen is it's an excellent design. We know it's a thermal A-frame, that kind of triangle with a ridge coming from it. It's probably the easiest to build because with a lean-to, where you put a beam between two verticals, you're looking for quite a lot of long straight bits and lots of thatching. This one, you don't need as many long limbs to build it. It's also quite compact, so you stay warm in it rather than losing a lot of your heat. The downside is if there's any bad weather, there's not loads of room inside them to work. You end up doing everything lying on your side. I've slept in hundreds of these and I've made them all over the place. So it's a really, really neat design. It's a bit of a, I don't know, from cowboy films originally, but it's a bit of a TVism to put circles of rocks around your fire. You don't need to, especially not if you've got them from somewhere like the lake edge, because moist rocks can explode when they're near a fire, so I wouldn't do that. In terms of building a shelter, in the woods is a good thing. You've got plenty of resources. Near water is a good thing. You know, you want to be able to get water to drink. You don't want to be too close to it so there's not biting insects. You've got to check above to make sure there's nothing that's going to fall down and hit you on the head like a deadfall from the trees. But the one thing that I just spotted at the back of his shelter, it does look like there's a fairly cheeky drop off behind him. Now, if you get up in the night to go to the bathroom or whatever, and you get disorientated, you don't want to be near a life-threatening hazard like a cliff. So don't site your shelter near cliff edges. That would be a bit of a no-no. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. It makes total sense if it's chucking it down with rain and you're cold and wet to seek shelter from the rain. And if you're away from your shelter, then yeah, going under a rocky overhang or into a cave is a natural choice. If you then light a fire inside a cave, you could have a major drama because the heat change can drop massive slabs of rock down from the roof and the ceiling of the cave. And unless you're a geologist and you can identify the difference between the types of rock in the area, you're not going to know for sure if it's going to do that. So I personally wouldn't advocate lighting fires in caves. If you've got those amazing flares, the pyrotechnic devices, don't waste them throwing them into a cave. Use them at your site if you hear an aircraft and you think it's coming towards you to signal for rescue, or use it to ignite your signal fire because it'll give a massive welly to that brash that you've collected to make that go up into a big pillar of fire and smoke. The one thing I would say though is that his little Bic lighter, where'd you buy his one? It lasts forever. I mean, if you've got a Bic lighter that lasted as long as that, we put them in all the survival packs. It's amazing. And then the next bit, when he goes in and gets attacked by Gollum, well, you ask silly questions, you get silly answers. Walking into a cave, things are going to live in there, aren't they? It'll either be bats or bears in real world, so yeah, don't do it, kids. If you've never actually cut a tree down with an axe, don't be fooled into thinking it's quick and easy. It takes ages. What we saw there was a man with fire axe walking around a giant tree, chopping it like a beaver would chew at it. That's not how you chop a tree down. It's complicated, physics is involved, and it's incredibly dangerous. And one of the things that you should never do, which our guy does there, is stand behind it admiring your work as it falls over, because they'll kick back off the stump, and they're called widow makers for a reason. The shelter he's making out of those, it's like 90 degrees wrong. If you're making a lean-to shelter, you want the vertical bits that are on the roof to go that way so that water runs down and off them rather than this way where it all drips through onto you. Catching the rainwater in the turtle shell is a good plan. It's always good to keep some in case it stops raining. Equally, if you're lazy, why not catch the rainwater that's running off your shelter? It saves you walking down to the lake and back each time. Turtles are good too. If you can find plenty of them, stick it on the fire, eat it out of the shell, throw the shell over the shoulder. And that's what they were doing in caves for thousands of years. They found midden piles in caves in Europe with just loads and loads of empty turtle shells because they were literally having them like TV dinners, looking at the cave paintings flickering in the light. Making a working bow and having enough arrows that will fly true is really, really difficult and takes quite a lot of graft. What people tend to make is just sticks that they can throw to stun something and then go and pounce on it. Our man's brilliant. He's made himself a bow and arrows and can take out a rabbit at like decent range. He's got no worries now finding enough food because he's going to get his arrows back, and each time he shoots he's probably going to have some food at the end. So yeah, that's pretty decent going, I reckon. More like expert hunter-gatherer than survivor. The boiling pot that he's got is gold. You know, after creating a good cutting tool like a knife or an axe in his case, making something that you can boil water or cook in is really difficult. So to have a good pot like that is a godsend. The fact that he's put it straight onto the fire, you'll learn by your mistakes if you do that often enough, because at some point it will tip over. Then you've got to relight your fire and re-provide, you know, the water and the food. So what you want is a nice stable way of holding it in real world. He's a one-man deforesting machine, and the speed that he's doing it's incredible. You know, we want to get Greenpeace onto him. He's probably knocked down tennis courts worth every day. If ever you've watched the World's Strongest Man competition, you'll see a similar thing to that log sled as a way of testing out the strongest humans on the planet, and they struggle to pull it. So whether you could make one out of twigs and push half a ton of logs across rocky ground, not really credible, is it? The house that he's built, the home that he's built, it's like a Wild West fort, isn't it? Hats off. that must have taken years. I would say it's strayed from survival though. We're at risk of actually involving ourselves in agriculture there with some of the plants that he's growing. And we do see people do that when we're away for a long time. It's not uncommon for people to start trying to make themselves as comfy as they can. It's common sense. So little tables for the bits next to the hammock. I do that. People make chairs because it's uncomfortable sitting on the ground all the time. I even saw one guy make a chandelier for candles out of bamboo, which worked brilliantly until it all went up in flames. This does seem to have been a penny drop moment for him, doesn't it, where it's like, this is his future, he is not leaving. People struggle with that. The best example of that happening to someone is a guy called Alexander Selkirk, who was marooned in 1707 on what is now known as Robinson Crusoe Island. The problem he had wasn't that he wasn't surviving, because he was thriving in the same way as the guys here. The problem was being on his own for years broke him psychologically. Isolation is one of the biggest stresses we can endure as humans. We're social creatures. And when a rescue ship eventually turned up to Alexander Selkirk's island, all he could say was, marooned. So yeah, we've touched upon the taboo that is cannibalism, and that it's a taboo for a reason. You know, people have had to resort to it over the centuries when they've been in really dire need. Famously, the Donner Party, who were crossing the Rockies to get to California, got overwintered, and there were stories of cannibalism amongst them. So that's not that long ago in like civilized people who are living in really dire circumstances. And the problem with anything like that is if you do something that is totally against your moral compass, you have to live with it later if you survive. The good thing, I suppose, about us as humans is that we are moral creatures largely, if you accept that about 1% of people are probably psychopaths. One of the best things to pack as survival food is a can of dog food, because you will only eat it when you're really hungry. That's true of anything like this. If you think it's repulsive, you'll only eat it if you're really, really hungry. It is all, you know, it's all a mental game after that, isn't it? It does happen though. It's really difficult to capture the gritty reality of survival on screen. Really difficult. It's especially challenging in a game. I think this game's done a decent job of it. The one thing that you could do to make this gaming experience more realistic for yourself would be to stand in a cold shower fully dressed and then try it with numb hands. And that's what it's like. You know, it's hardship inoculation survival, and it makes you mentally tougher after you've done it. And this is different. This is a game. You know, you're in a centrally heated house while you're playing it, making decisions while you're fully compass mentis. So it'll never fully represent the extremities that people have to endure real world. But yeah, we know that, don't we?
And if you like that video, why not check out a sword expert reacting to all the weapons in Elden Ring?